Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus podcast episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, my interview guest grew up in a crime family, turned informant, became an undercover agent, and helped bring corrupt politicians and law enforcement officials to justice. He wrote a book about his life titled Conflicting Loyalties. His name is Aiden Gabor, and in my interview with Aiden, we'll follow the teleportation sound. Aiden Gabor, did I pronounce your name correctly?
Yes, sir. Yes, you did.
Welcome to the Apollo Papyrus podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being on, sir.
Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Hello, my name's Aiden Gabor. I had a pretty screwed up life and kind of did a book about my story.
Your memoir, which is the book you've written, is called Conflicting Loyalties. Without spoiling too much of your memoir, what is it about?
It's about my life story, starting as a young age, working with a well-known family, working for the DOJ, and finding my love, and then finding my spirituality, something I was never expecting in my life.
Why did you choose the title Conflicting Loyalties for your memoir?
Well, during this whole process, when I started out and working with the DOJ, I couldn't tell anybody. I had to keep everything to myself. And then both when you work, you have a family, you don't say anything against your family. I didn't, but I still felt betrayed. But when you become a police officer, which I did in my second part of my life, I had this thing called the blue line, and you don't cross it, men and women of law enforcement. And, I was taken down by politicians and bad police officers. And in that time, I became an alcoholic, an extreme, tried to commit suicide about several hundred times. And that whole time I couldn't talk. So I was conflicting on what I should and shouldn't do.
How long did it take you to write your memoir from start to finish?
Well, I didn't want to do it. A buddy of mine, Sam, and I was having some issues, and I was having night terrors, and my wife, Sabrina, I was throwing her around and acting a fool, which I didn't even know, but I was having bad ones. So she called me, started talking, and he only knows about 90% of what I've done in my life. And he's like, you got to write a memoir. And I'm like, no, hell, I'm not writing one, F you. After a little bit talking, it took about 2.5 years for me to write this. I had a ghostwriter help me, and it was a memoir, so you had to keep going back and forth. Oh, I forgot about this. Oh, we didn't put everything in the book. We took some out, a pretty good chunk out, and it wasn't flowing because I'd be at 16, and then we go back to 23, then back to 17, and then 25. And my wife, Sabrina, was like, this is not flowing. So she helped with the ghostwriter because he's writing a memoir, and we're just putting stuff and put it together the way it is.
You mentioned a little bit about what it's like to work with your ghostwriter. Who was your ghostwriter, and could you tell us a little bit more about what it was like to work with her?
I'm not going to say his name I promised him. It was different for me because I'm not I didn't really want to talk, and it's hard for me to talk about it. I'm getting better at it. But it was a hard process because I kept getting bad memories coming back that I kind of hid. But as far as working with him, he was amazing. I mean, I chose him. He was a great writer, everything, but he had a disability, which I'm big with people with special needs, and he had a little disability, and he was perfect with him, and I got together great, and it was started out hard, but by the end, it was. It made me feel better.
How did you get your memoir published? Was it self-published, traditionally published, or published by a hybrid press?
Well, we kind of like a hybrid. We got Skyhorse, and we pitched it to them, and they ended up liking it, and we went through them. And basically, that's how it went.
What was life in a crime family like for you? Now, you were a teenager when you turned informant, but what was life in a crime family like for you before you turned informant?
I started 9, 10, just doing things. I was asked to come to the shop already, and it was a family. Like my dad was an associate with them, and we would have gatherings. If they would come, like the moms and stuff in the old country come in, and we'd cook, and it was a family atmosphere. Like you can call it barbecue nowadays, but it would, we just get together, good food, good eats, good everything, and just started from there. It was a family, and we went, just started. Hey, I was big for my age, and we get little tuffles. The kids, every kid's 5, 6 years older than me, and I would beat up some of them and get my ass handed to me a couple times, but I never cried or did anything. I would always try to finish the fight, even if I was losing bad. And Eddie saw something in me, which is a cow, and he asked me to come around and start doing things for him. And that's how it started for me. And I'll be honest with you, I loved every minute of it. I loved the respect part of it.
How were you able to survive? And I'm assuming you probably faced a ton of death threats and probably still do to this day. And how did your life change after turning informant and even becoming a law enforcement officer?
It was kind of difficult for me because I was always taught, cops are bad, cop this, and then we would seen a lot of them that were getting money from us and stuff. And when I started, like I said, I'm going to say, I never said anything against the crew I ran with, never said anything against any of them, even though they may think of that. And my life changed when I started working not undercover, but as an informant within law enforcement, getting information and having people go to jail that I dealt with as a teenager. It was extremely hard. And it was, like I said, I became an alcoholic and tried to commit suicide. Could be up close to 1,000 times. I don't exactly know, but I know of at least 200. Because sometimes I woke up with the gun next to me and around in it, and there's much times I remember doing it. I remember putting it in my mouth, putting it to my head, putting it to my temple, and pulling the trigger. And for some reason, God just said, "Yeah, we're not gonna let you die." And my buddies would find me. My one buddy Don would find me in a hotel, all drunked out, and it was difficult.
That was quite scary. How you thought about very close to ending your life. I mean, I've had suicidal thoughts from clinical depression in the past, but I was never anywhere close to taking my own life.
Yeah, like I said, I had to keep quiet about it because, I mean, when I went to DOJ and they approached me and they were telling me about this new RICO law, I was very skeptical, but when they were telling me about my dad going to jail, me going, I really didn't care. But when they put my mother and said, your mother, when they had a picture of her with Eddie, with Dominic, a couple of guys, that she was looking at jail time, and I grew up a mama's boy. And I did that, and they said, you couldn't talk about it. You're going in as an informant when there's no backup, so if something happens to you, oh well, something happens to you. We want information. And it got to me because when I started doing it, I started drinking, and it just got worse and worse, and I just wanted to end it, and I couldn't talk about it. And I still say to this day, when I started working in law enforcement, I would see St. Michael with the flaming sword saying, you betrayed, and swiping at me in my hallucinations. And I seen it, and I would just pick up my 357, couple times, I put a round in there, and I would spin it, pull the trigger, and drop it. And I remember a couple times waking up where there'd be 2 or 3 rounds in that gun, and I know I pulled the trigger. And for some reason, God just didn't want me to end my life that way.
Moving on to corruption in politics and law enforcement, who were some of the corrupt politicians and law enforcement officials you were able to bring to justice, and what kind of corrupt acts were these people engaging in?
Well, I can't say names, but I will tell you that they were mayors and commissioners, and they were police officers, and most were involved with, gangs and drugs, were giving money for favors, taking money, racketeering. The law enforcement guys were mostly, like I said, doing drugs, working with the gangs of drugs. I ran with the family. One of the rules that he had is we'll do steal cars. It was our big thing. We would do the numbers, like, betting and stuff. We had prostitution, which I wasn't allowed to be part of because at the time I was a teen. And we would loan shark. And I worked as and when I started my young life, I was an enforcer collecting and stuff. And in law enforcement, I was an officer, and I would get the information and I would pass along to DOJ to use against them. I remember the one time I took down a bad police officer who was moonlighting as basically a hitman for another crew. And I said, "Do you need me to testify?" And they said, "No. When you testify, you're done, one and done. We want you to do our thing." So they would they tested me at the one department. They sent me to the one I grew up in. And they wanted me to get the guys that I knew growing up. And I was thinking, why would you guys want this? They were very forthcoming with information. They said, just do this. And I thought, these guys are assholes because they want me to do this. And after I started doing it, I said, I knew these guys as kids. I would see them getting money from Eddie and all, and talk to them and stuff. And when I got on, the mayor who was taking money for him that I knew, he said, "Why are you getting on, Aiden?" And I said, "To do what you need done." He goes, "Well, you want to be a police officer? Will you do what you've been told? Will you do?" I go, "Whatever you need me to do." "You'll toe the line." "Yes, sir. I'll do whatever you need me to do." All right. And so basically, I think they wanted a snake to go in the snake pit.
In 2020, this was during the year of the COVID lockdowns. You were diagnosed with ALS. How does ALS affect your daily life?
Well, like I said, it sucks. Losing momentum, it's a little hard to walking and gripping things. Just starting right now, it's still medications are still keeping it in bay. But I became spiritual, and I attempted all suicide, God wouldn't let me do it. And I think God said, he's got a sense of humor. And he said, "You know what? We're not going to let you die this easy. We're going to screw with you for a while. So we're going to give you ALS. So you get to play with that for a number of years and die whatever way it is, suffocation or whatever it will be. And we have other plans for you to die. We're not going to let you end it up that way." So it's been kind of tough.
Sometime, I don't know if this was recently or a long time ago, but you converted to the Baha'i faith. Did I pronounce the name of your religion correctly?
Yes, sir. It's the Baha'i faith.
Baha'i faith. Okay. When and why did you convert to the Baha'i faith, and what is being a practicing member of the Baha'i faith like?
It started with Sam, my buddy. Well, Don and Sam, when I was having hallucinations and having the night terrors, my wife called down, and growing up, Don would always tell me that I need to get spiritual. He's Catholic. And I used to say, "Screw you, I work for the other guy." I never believed in religion. I said I would work for the other guy, collect souls for the other guy. And when I was younger, I was Catholic. I would go to confessional, and, the priest would ask me, "What sins have you committed? What have you done wrong?" I said, "I didn't do that, and I didn't see nothing." "No, Aiden, what did you do?" I'm like, "I didn't do a damn thing. I didn't fucking see anything." And he would get so mad, "Get the fuck out of here. Just get out of the confessional. Let's go." Because I wouldn't say anything. I was never. And then Sam came up when I was going through all this, and he's one that suggested a memoir and go over everything. He says, "You need to get religion." And so he gave me a couple books on the Baha'i faith. So I started reading it, and I thought, what is this crap? And Abdul Baha'i, it's the youngest religion, and really the youngest that ever had a miracle that was actually publicized in newspapers in the 1850s, and with the Bob. And I'm reading these, and I'm thinking, wow. And everything they have on there, they believe in everybody's equal. There is man and women are equal. They're like in some religions, the woman is subservient to the man. I never believed that growing up. And CMC say, "You're a Baha'i, Aiden, and you never knew it." And so I started reading, and one day I'm out in the sun, and it was actually a clear day, and I just felt different. I did not like this feeling. It was something different inside me, and I'm reading it, and this is back about 2018. And I am just like, wow, okay, I don't like this feeling. I go inside, I said, Sabrina, I hate this feeling. She goes, what? And I tell her what it is you're feeling it. You're feeling God. And I go, no, I don't need this crap. So I started doing it. And then I started, okay, I'm really reading. I'm enjoying Abdul Baha'u's writings. And I started doing these Rui classes, which is like a Bible class. And my wife, Sabrina, went with me for 3 years for the start of it, almost 4 years through these classes. And we did Rui class twice a week, which is a Bible class. I do it 3 times a week now. And she would do it with me, help me through it. We'd read it, go through everything. And she never converted. She saved her Catholic faith. She never converted to, but she stayed behind me. Sam stayed behind me and said, this is new. Don said, see, I don't care if it's not Catholic, you're doing something. And I felt different inside. I feel like, and now with ALS, I want to live. I didn't care about dying my whole life. I didn't care if I get killed. I got shot several times, stabbed. People tried to kill me to this day. And I still, I'm leaving behind. I think good out there. We all, this world needs help. And everybody's equal. Black, white people, green. We're all equal. So I believe in the Baha'i faith truly. And I do now 3 nights a week, a Baha'i class. And I enjoy every minute of it. And I never thought for me to do something like this with everything I've done in my life that I would actually be so much spiritual. It's like being in an extremely dark place. I was in a dark, dark place with things you do, to coming to the light and feeling the light. And that's how I feel with it today. Being bad is easy. It's easy as fuck being a bad person, doing the bad things, doing all that. Being good is hard. And I struggle with that every day, but I work with it, learning the Baha'i faith.
Aiden, you were a very interesting guest for this podcast, and I thank you for appearing on the Apollo Papyrus podcast.
Well, thank you so much, sir. And I am truly honored to be on with you today. It was my honor to be on with you there, Aaron. And I thank you again for having me.
Aiden has lived an interesting and fascinating life, and it was wonderful to interview him. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to find your writing and reading purpose. Bye for now. Copyright 2024, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.